You're listening to the Devil Dog Talk Show.
This show contains explicit material and is recommended for ages 18 and older for mature audiences only. But hey, it's the internet.
What I'm doing today is just before this interview that you're about to listen with Max Rudsten from POSIBL, who is an amazing cultivator agricultural project thing that's just amazing out in Salinas, California. POSIBL, POSIBL. Yep, that's how you spell it. And you could reach them at POSIBL.com. You can also check out Get HUMO, because that's who I'm promoting right here in your ear holes, in your wonderful electronical devices and speaker thingies that are reproducing my amazing frequency of vocalizations and verbalizations. That's right. So what I'm talking about right now in this plugless shameless plug, that's how you're supposed to say it, is HUMO. Yeah, I was talking with Max, and me and Max, of course, we're jibbing jabbing in the beginning, middle, end of this episode you're about to listen to about HUMO, or how you're supposed to actually pronounce it, and he does a better job than me. HUMO. The H is silent. Listen to the episode with Susie, and we go in on that a little bit about the history of the product development and the amazing people at HUMO and POSIBL. And right now, what you're going to listen to is POSIBL. Max Rudsten from POSIBL, their CRO, Chief Revenue Officer. And you know what? The conversation's just amazing. So for me to say that at the end of it, when I promised that I would get a baggie or two of HUMO, I did. I went for the eighths. Yes. Yeah, people do measurements like that in the industry, eighths and whatnot, or if you need it, 3.5 grams. It's a poquito amount, but it's a good enough amount. I promise you that. Like, get yourself an eighth and test it out, see what you like. Try out different products, different lines, different strains is what I'm really getting at. Well, what I tried was the horchata. Yes, horchata. I got the horchata from HUMO in Fresno, California, at the Artist Tree dispensary there, on the way to Yosemite, California. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Yosemite. That's how me and my kids were saying the whole time. It was a gorgeous place, and I don't think I could have made it, buddy, okay, without the greatness that I got at that dispensary and the wonderful products that I got, including some great edibles, not going to lie, which really made the trip so much better. I'm a broken old man, and I got a lot of problems, medically speaking. But you know what? I utilize cannabis, friend, okay, to push myself every day, because I am using all of my tools in a toolbox, okay? We're keeping it serious here for a moment. You got to apply those therapies daily, people, okay? And that may be cannabis, like I do. So try out HUMO. I'm going to review a bit of horchata because it was really good. I used it throughout the day. It was the hybrid. It was very, very spectacular tasting. Had a good overall sensation and flavor. Honestly, it was very highly rated on the THC spectrum. And in this episode, we do discuss a bit about THC and all the endocannabinoids that you can actually be looking for, and all the terpenes and the classifications of products and all the great stuff that you cannabis users or cannabis entrepreneurs or investors or anybody looking to listen. This stuff, okay, this one right here is called Reserva de la Familia. This is their super, super great stuff. It's Neverita. See, as a Mexican fella, I should be saying this a little bit better, but I'm not. I'm going to try. Neverita. There you go. It's another eighth that I got, and it's the Reserva de la Familia. Their high-end or super top-shelf specialty cannabis from HUMO. That's right, HUMO, which was grown by POSIBL out in Salinas, California. They have a great product, and you know what? I've been smoking on this for about a week, and it's an eighth. So I just take a little bit at a time, and it really just helps out smooth things out, the pain scale and all the other type of anxieties and issues that I have. But just in general, as a product, the packaging is wonderful. It has that, protection thing that we need to make sure kids don't get into it. The appeal of the package just looks great. I like the way it looks. If you want to take a look at the package or review it a bit about yourself, check out gethumo.com and also POSIBLproject.com. And they'll be able to get you to your dispensaries, or, call up your favorite dispensaries and be like, hey, yo, we need to get this product up in this house, up in this heezy. It's HUMO and POSIBL products. That's right, HUMO. Reserva de la Familia, like I was saying, Neverita. It also happens to be a Bad Bunny song. So for all my Latinos out there, Bad Bunny, hey, there you go. So get yourself an eighth or more. I promise you will not be disappointed. It's HUMO, one more time, HUMO, gethumo.com. And POSIBLproject.com. So listen to this episode. Tell me what you think. Leave a comment. Listen, like, and share. And we'll be here for you. All right. Much love. Later. Welcome to the Devil Doc Talk Show. Today we have Max Rudsten, Chief Revenue Officer of POSIBL. And we're going to be discussing a little bit about himself, a bit of history, and what POSIBL is. If you remember, we've had a couple guests on, and one of them we discussed a little bit about POSIBL and the amazing stuff they got going on out in Salinas, California, I believe, correct?
That's correct.
Nailed it. Look at me, doing good today. Coffee's kicking in.
Yep.
All right. So, Max, if you'd give us a brief history and introduce yourself a little bit, and then we'll get rolling on the big questions about what is POSIBL and what is possible with POSIBL.
For sure. Well, I'm Max Rudsten. I'm Chief Revenue Officer at POSIBL. I'll give you a little bit about my just career path, if that works for you. So, started my career in finance. I majored in it, right? So I felt like that was what I had to do. So I started my career actually in kind of corporate finance, Wall Street to be specific, kind of during the biggest meltdown in financial history, 2007, 2008.
Jesus.
Yeah. So learned a ton of lessons. They were firing everyone above me. I was cheap and seemingly good at the job. So I kind of rose the ranks pretty quickly, but never really connected with the industry, never really connected with the job I was doing. I made the decision just to kind of pull the ripcord and focused more on kind of entrepreneurial passions that were kind of bubbling up. So first thing I wanted to do was, actually build like a tangible product, something I could hold in my hands. And, I was into the distilled spirits world. So I said, hey, why don't I create a distilled spirits brand? And it was based on an alcohol that was kind of niche, but something that San Francisco loved to drink, a booze called Fernet. So started a Fernet brand. It was basically the second domestic Fernet brand in the U.S. and started to build that from the ground up. And as I was doing that, had some buddies with some cultivation assets in places like Shasta County. And they wanted to bring me in as a partner to basically bring some business structure to what they were doing in the kind of the old Prop 215 days. And also help them build a brand around their dad, who's kind of this like old legacy cultivator. He had fled California during the Vietnam War, started this hippie commune in Kauai, where he grew weed, as part of the livelihood of this commune. So it was this like very utopian story for a guy that had been working for a bank for 7 years. This felt like something I needed to get involved in. So went on this very interesting parallel path, kind of building a brand and a business in this like really regulated alcohol supply chain, doing the same thing in a really like cowboy unregulated supply chain. Learned a ton of lessons. 2017, as things were kind of approaching the license market, I thought it would be a good idea to help found a distribution business with two partners. So we got heavy into kind of the distribution side of cannabis. For about 4.5 years, we built a really solid logistics and technology solution for cannabis. And then I was able to kind of pivot into the POSIBL opportunity about a year ago. I actually celebrated my 1-year anniversary this week. So
congratulations, man.
Yeah, thank you, sir. I've made it through. And in cannabis, 1 year is like 7 years. It's like the dog year analogy. But yes, as Chief Revenue Officer, I know it's kind of a broad term, but I really oversee really all the sales and marketing functions for the business. So really everything that has to do with kind of revenue strategy, growth, expansion, I really oversee that larger commercial strategy.
Awesome. That is a spectacular breakdown, man. I'm like, wait a minute. So you went from Wall Street, right, during well, I would say the era of where people, well, back in the day, in the 80s and 90s, when they'd just be leaping off of buildings, right? During the crash, right? Like, it's pretty fucking bad. Trust me, I know. I went through the whole real estate, that was just me in real estate. I could just imagine how the rest of, every aspect of anything going on during that time was going. It has been horrible. But to pivot and to find your niche in alcohol distillation and bring in a second brand or a second type of alcohol back to California, I should say, and then transitioning into cannabis. Now, have you always been into cannabis? Do you actually grow the cannabis, or is this more of the centered mindset towards, like you were saying, logistics, distribution, and the financial aspects of, what it takes to get product in the hand of the consumer?
Yeah, I'm on the cannabis side as a Cali kid. It's been, part of my, young adulthood journey, since I kind of smelled it. Right. So I remember, smoking my first bowl when I was in like 8th grade, with some friends, buddies, older brothers, had the plug, and kind of the rest is history. So I've always, been kind of immersed in cannabis. Prior to us joining this call here, we talked about music, big music head myself, and, music and cannabis go together very, very perfectly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was always like super interested in it. And I think, my experience helping basically get a tangible product, a CPG product off the ground that I could hold in my hand, it was just natural for me to kind of dive into the cannabis world. And at that time, you kind of needed to know someone who was in it, right? And I was lucky enough to have friends in my network that were kind of deeply embedded in it. And I just kind of jumped in head first, leveraging obviously a lot of the learnings of just like corporate business and building business. And being able to apply it to a market that was still very, very young and growing and burgeoning. But for me, it all started with the plant. And, my first foray was on the cultivation level. But, back then, you did everything, right, from seed all the way to sale. So if you were growing the weed, you were, processing the weed, you were finding outlets for the weed. So it was really kind of a vertical type of experience, pretty early on. But I always have had fascination with like supply chain, how things move from A to B, so naturally, I learned a ton of lessons in alcohol too. I just didn't love the distribution, how distribution worked in alcohol. So when cannabis was kind of coming on the scene from a license perspective, I thought I could solve some big gaps in terms of how the distribution model was set up. Which is why really we focused on a logistics offering where, brands could have that direct connection to the retailers, and we kind of stood out of their way. We were just the platform to help them get their products in the hands of the retailers, rather than being that kind of blocker or that gap between them having that direct connection to that retailer. So that's really what excited me. But, on the POSIBL side, and I talked a little bit about what POSIBL is, but we are building the farm of the future, right? So we're a large, mixed light cultivation, in the Salinas Valley, salad bowl of the world. It's one of the best places to grow weed. It's a mixed light canopy, so it's supplemental light. So we get to use the power of the sun, but also, the power of electricity and light to really get the full spectrum of the plant. And we do that in a way where, we're powering brands that maybe don't want to build those facilities themselves, right? So, we have a house of brands that's been growing over the last, year and a half. And, for me to go back to this link in the supply chain and be able to be at the forefront of how brands are coming to market, that's really what brought me here, and it's exciting for me.
That's awesome. Now, when you bring up POSIBL and the agricultural aspects of what's going on with it, I've done several interviews, one of them with the USDA guys, director Carlos Suarez, I believe his name is. I could be wrong. Don't break my balls on that, guys. No, the way he broke down soil conservation, that's how he started in USDA. Because I didn't know that the USDA had 27 different departments within it. I don't know if anybody does, tell you the truth. But when you're looking into all the different aspects of agriculture, there's a tremendous amount of research that goes into from seed to sale, right? And cannabis is no different. It just happens to be more regulated and not as embraced federally right yet, which it should be. You know, that's politics. Politics does its stuff, you know, a little bit slower than I think even research and science and in general anything else that could be done better. I mean, look at our water, you know. And I was actually looking into that on the aspects of your guys' percentages. So you produce year round, right? And you cultivate year round, and you reduce the water consumption. And the way you guys grow, it does like all the best things you could possibly want within agriculture. You're not using, you know, all the pesticides and all the different growth hormone or whatever that's called for plants. You guys are doing a great job. And that's what I really found interesting was the technical side of it. Like, what is light? What did you say? Light supplementation? Am I using the wrong word here?
Yeah, supplemental light.
Supplemental light. Okay.
You know, also known as mixed light. So, you know, if you look at our greenhouses, you know, there's indoor intensity light at the flip of a switch, right? And when the sun, you know, for instance, like this spring, we've had some of the lowest light intensity that we've ever seen. It was something like 26% less light intensity from last year. So what that means is when there's not as much intensity from the sun, we can flip the switch on the mixed light canopy and give the plants what they need to reach their full potential. So it's a really great way to grow weed in this environment because that creates consistent high quality product all year round. If you didn't have the light in, say, the winter months, you're not going to get the same quality because you're just not going to get the same type of light intensity from your sun. So, you know, I really got to tip my hat to the operations team. Our COO comes from agriculture out of Mexico. He helped, you know, scale, you know, large, you know, tomato greenhouse, organic greenhouse tomato production. So he's really taking a lot of the best practices from that world in Mexico and applying them to this cannabis cultivation in Salinas. So yeah, it's to us and to me and someone who's a consumer of cannabis as well. You're really going to get the highest quality weed for the fairest value. If you have to grow weed indoor only, right? There's obviously larger costs associated with that type of cultivation method. We use the big bulb, the sun in the sky, flip the switch on the lights to really maximize the full expression of the plant at a lower cost. That's
amazing. So you're utilizing nature, implementing it with science, you know, research, agriculture, decades probably of just infield application. And you guys are able to produce a product year round, which is amazing. Like to me, you know, I grow outdoor personally, just for myself. Mm-hmm. It's been a while, but I love the experience of outdoor growth and I love the experience of, you know, indoor growth. I've tried that and you're right. It's hellacious. It is really expensive just in general for the electrical cost because you're running these, what is it, tungsten, magnesium or sodium halide or LED, which is, you know, okay, good. And then fluorescent supplement all. And then you have to also think about your water, potential water damage, humidity levels, temperature. You know, there's just this is a huge spectrum. Like we were talking about music just, you know, at the beginning of the interview where you can take something from one level to the next. And you said it perfectly about that premium price difference, right? And looking at the products and the brands that you guys have developed at POSIBL, I'm just kind of taken back, like how does it go from this concept of implementing nature and supplementing it with technology to producing multiple brands, right? How many brands are you guys working with now?
Yeah, so we have kind of the business to business segment, right, which I mentioned earlier, where we fuel brands that don't have licensed operational assets. So they have incredible brand IP. They have a go-to-market plan, but they don't have, the facilities or the vertical nature to basically grow their own weed, package it, and get it to market, right? Because that takes ton of time, ton of cost, right? The permitting structure in our county, just all of it is very heavy from a capital intensive standpoint. So we really try to fuel the brands that really want to focus, their primary effort on the sales, marketing, and just growing the consumer loyalty, and then we kind of take care of everything else. So on that side, we work with over 10 brands. Those kind of fluctuate in and out. It's been obviously a challenging market with brands kind of coming and going. And then we have our kind of internal house brands. Those are ones that we actually own and operate and kind of manage through the California supply chain. And those are about 3 brands today. And there is a larger M&A strategy that we're employing in the market to continue to round out that in-house portfolio, that assortment strategy. But I would say all in all, we work with over 16 brands, all different kinds of SKUs, pre-rolls, jarred flower, bagged flower, kind of you name it. We can largely grow it and produce it.
That's beautiful. So when you guys are developing a brand, do you start with genetics, or how does it start? How does that relationship begin?
With the brand partners, or just, from brand just development in general, I think, having a really good lineup of genetics and strains is paramount if you're going to be, a competitive flower brand. So that is a big part of, our strategy as far as like how we build our canopy, how we grow our menu, is our deep relationships with the breeder community. Seeing that I've been in the industry now for since 2023, 24, 2013, 14, so going on 10 years. We have some extensive relationships with some really good breeders that are coming out with really cool stuff. So we're always kind of R&Ding that stuff and pushing it through our program to see, what new strains fit within the menu. And I think that definitely is part of the conversation as you bring a brand to market. But it's also just finding that white space in the market too. There's a lot of folks that, think they have a good brand idea, but then, you look at the landscape and there's a million other people doing the exact same thing. I think the brands that can tell an authentic story, that can differentiate themselves outside of just the quality of the flower and the strains, is going to be just as important. So the story that those brands tell, coupled with really high quality, consistent genetics, is really what sets the groups apart in the market today.
Awesome, dude. That is great, because I tell you what, I don't know what the hell's happened, but I can never find a sour diesel or a diesely strain ever again. It's just like this just wave of life has just left you, like the 80s, right? Like like when flat tops and rat tails were in, before the mullet. And you're like, okay, guys, like I miss that so much. And I tried to grow a diesel the other year and I just couldn't get it right. It didn't punch right, like you were saying, when you first smell cannabis. Either as a youth or as a person, you get older. When you first smell cannabis, I feel as though the aroma is really what embraces a person. And then the smokability, like, is it harsh? Is it, are the nugs dense? Like all of the benchmarks of a good cannabis flower, is it hitting? Is it stony? Am I getting couch locked? Is this lofty? Am I feeling energized? There's so many ways to rate a good cannabis strain. But when I was looking for a sour diesel, right, me and my brother-in-law, we talked about this a lot. Like we would go into all these other, dispensaries, and throughout my years of, cannabis enjoyment, I have not been able to find the right diesely, smelly, that funky, skunky, lovely, like just smell. Yeah. And I noticed that like a lot of different brands, like you were saying, you can kind of get lost in the ocean, right? Trying to find a fish, right? But at the same time, where you guys are developing these genetics that are like really good benchmarkers. Like I bring up HUMO because I did the interview with that the lady that does that brand, and they have a very great product line, a very great smell, great head to it, great effect, and things like that. So when you guys are sitting down with your genetics R&D teams, how do you develop a strain? Do you guys work with the I was going to say genealogists. I don't think that's right. It might be, but when you guys sit down with that department and you guys go, hey, we want to develop, a Deasley or a cat piss, or something that's just going to smack you the moment you open that bag. How does somebody come up with that? Do you guys start from making your own what is it called, cultivars? I learned that. That's a word I learned. And do you guys breed in house, or do you guys because you did say you guys do a lot of that, right? A lot of the different.
No, so we're one ring removed from the actual the breeding process. So typically what we'll do is we'll I'm close with some breeders and we'll say, hey, like we want these characteristics, right? And they'll go into their library, their bank, and say, hey, I got this pheno that I think would work really well in your environment. Why don't we give you some cuts? And then, you run it through your environment, see how it performs. And then we kind of go from there. So I am not the artisan. We're not the artisans at all. We work with the artisans to kind of come up with the type of strain profile that we want to see in the brands. And, to go back to your sour diesel comment, I'm a huge sour diesel guy, and I couldn't agree with you more. Back in the day when we were growing in Prop 215, it was sour diesel and Blue Dream. Like those were the two strains that we'd grow all the time, right? And the commercialization of cannabis has really kind of pushed a lot of those old school genetics out because various things, right? Like one of my favorite strains is a strain called Red Congo. It's a sativa strain, but it flowers in 12 weeks, right? And, you basically need strains that have quicker flowering times because of the economics of cannabis. Because if you're waiting for that, to flower, 4 weeks longer than maybe an 8-week strain, that can, eat into your margins over time because you don't have as many turns throughout the year. Right. So that's really why you've seen a lot of these great genetics that used to, be so prominent, start to kind of disappear. And, prior to my time, and this was kind of preceded my time at POSIBL, but these guys did something called the Sativa Preservation Society, where they worked with some really old school, like landrace sativa genetics and tried to push it through the greenhouse environment. It was a nightmare for my ops team because it was just the weed, took forever to flower. The look of the bag just wasn't what the market's used to now, right? The market's used to like purple candy and gas. Like that's what the market wants. So all the breeders have really rallied around how do we make more purple candy gas? And to be honest with you, a lot of the genetics to me are just a little bit tired. And, when you mentioned sour diesel, I got excited because I am working with some breeders on some old school meets new school crosses, right? So if you take a sour diesel and you cross it with something new, how do you get that flower time down? How do you commercialize it for the market today, but still pay homage to those like old school genetics? And I think that's really where I want to see the menu go is like, how do we get some headband crosses in here? How do we get some, sour diesel crosses, some Afghani crosses, like all these things that I think, for me are nostalgic, but are being lost in kind of the current landscape that we're operating in today.
Yeah, that is definitely in the, what are the kids saying? In the feels, like for me, right? Like I really miss that opening the bag and just going like, oh my God, dude, like that just pungent scent. And don't get me wrong, there's gorgeous flowers up and down the litany of all the different brands, growers, strains. I'm so glad you brought up the difference between sativa flowering timeframes and indica and hybrid flowering timeframes. And nobody grows rudialis or rudilis or whatever the hell that is, but I've never seen that on a product list. But for sativas, you're right, it takes fucking forever. And that was something I was worried because I grew a great sativa strain a couple years ago. Can't remember what the hell it was called. And it took a very, very much longer time than everything else, right? Everything else flipped probably late July, beginning of August. You can start seeing the pistils and, you know, all the beautiful hairs and everything you'd want to see to initiate, hey, we're in flower mode, baby. Yeah, let's change up the stuff. You know, let's make sure our watering cycles are on time. You know, all that cool stuff. I had set up a drip line. So stoked. I had my soil on point, organic, all that, you know, great stuff. And then I just kept seeing this fucker just staying veg. I was like, man, what am I doing wrong? Am I not good enough for you? You know, I was like, all the stressors of, you know, growing by yourself, you know, being a bit ignorant on the finessing of how to get it to do its thing, like you were saying, perfectly. Because sativas tend to do a lot better outdoor from what I read and hear. And when you go into the greenhouse, it's like you were saying, you know, if you're going to be spending probably, I don't even want to throw a fucking number out there. I'd be like hundreds of thousands of dollars a year just on electricity and water. Like I couldn't imagine. Like one of my buddies, he does CBD grow out here. One of the only, like you were saying, very difficult to get permits, very difficult to get licensing. He's one of the only organic farmers in the state or nation that does CBD, solely CBD, all organic, 100%. And he was telling me for 1 foot of water per acre or some shit like that, it's like $2,200. So I was like, dude, so you're just your water alone, you're at a ridiculous amount of money for water. So I mean, I could just imagine what it's like, you know, to do year-round grows, like Jesus Christ, and to put it to where, like you're bringing up, you know, working with those older genetics and phenotypes, which I forgot was a word, but thank you, I appreciate that, and getting those different types of cultivars, which is another good word to learn, to market, right? So. Are you guys seeing a lot more like a demand, like you were saying, a demand in the marketplace where it's based off of, I don't want to say social media, but that type of marketing where it's like when it's popular, that's exactly what you have to go to. But you know, the old heads, I could just imagine the younger group hearing this conversation and be like, man, you old heads only want sour diesel because I'm like, no, it was just great cannabis back in the day when you got a bag of great sour diesel. Was it White Rhino was another good one. Was it Blue Dream, I think, was another one. And I could be getting my strains all mixed up, but man, just to get those strains back a little bit, I'm like, man, I'd pay that premium price.
Yeah, man, it's listen, like we're operating in a world now where potency is king. And that's really the saddest thing about where we're at now. And you mentioned, you know, some of the old heads and, you know, the folks that are out in the Emerald Triangle have been growing weed for, you know, many, many, many years. Like you didn't have a potency test on that stuff. You had your nose, you had you had your eyes, and you had your lungs, right? So, you know, there's some folks that grow some of the terpiest, most wonderful flower in an outdoor environment up in the Emerald Triangle that, you know, maybe that tests 16, 17, 20%. Like you can't sell that in a dispensary right now. It just doesn't sell unless it's a very specific audience and very craft audience. And I think that's really the shame, you know, is that, you know, there's so many great strains and great genetics that exist that just are not performing in the market today. And, you know, going back to the purple candy gas thing, like a lot of folks are looking at what's happening on the traditional market, right? On the street, they're seeing kind of these strains pop off in the street. And then that's when, you know, maybe a licensed brand will get a hold of it, they'll get a cut of it, and they'll bring it into the licensed world. So a lot of folks are also taking cue from what's happening in the street, what's happening in the traditional market, and then making decisions in the licensed market. Because that's usually how the trends start and how the trends continue on. And frankly, you know, it's a lot of like purple candy gas, kind of like wrapper weed, right? Like people like that stuff right now. And it's tough to keep up with, you know, it's you know, they all kind of have the same, you know, characteristics, if I'm being completely honest with you. And there's a lot of hype that goes into some of these things. But I'm like you, like I'm the old head where I would much prefer to, smoke a 4 to 5% terpene flower with 20% THC than a, half a percentage point of terpenes and a 34% THC. Right. So,
Exactly.
and I'm sure this podcast, you've chatted about the potency issue, but that's my honest view. Yeah, for sure.
No, I sure have. And that's something that, I'm doing another interview with the gentleman tomorrow. In fact, he sits on the cannabis board here in San Diego, Brian Buckley. Great guy. He does, I always fuck up the name, Hellman Growers Cannabis Valley. No, Hellman Valley Cannabis, I believe it's called. Hemland. I'm fucking it up. Look at me. Well, anyways, they do amazing job. And me and him had this conversation at length about the potency issues. And I don't want to say naivety or ignorance because people usually attest to that, to negativity or judgment or condensation. No, that's not the word. Being rude. And I go, no, like honestly, what you don't know, you don't know. And what I learned back in 2015 when I really invested heavily in my advocacy for cannabis for veterans was I couldn't sit back idly anymore about what I was seeing in the environment of what veterans go through on how, whether it be the VA or your Western medicine applies all these heavy psychotropic medications that were never ever utilized in day-to-day psychological or psychiatric medical necessities. But now more and more and more, we're seeing a heavier and heavier dosages of these psychotropic and modulating medications like SSRIs, SRNRIs, and all the different weird shit that they got. I'm telling you right now, they got just as many weird shit in medicines as they do strains in cannabis. So I sat back and I did a great interview with Sue Sisley and Roger Martin before he passed in 2015. And one of it was a cannabis investment, I don't want to say rodeo, but that's what it felt like. You could go around meeting people, network, and it was a great way to learn about the industry, of course, at that time. And the main conversation was, at that time, and I know it's pretty popular now, was the entourage effect and how terpene levels affect not only the absorption rate of certain CBN, CBD, THCA, THCN, or whatever the THCs break down into a billion different parts, and limonene and ilanine and all the different enes and all this great scientific shit, right? And I was just amazed because my takeaway was how do you increase the absorption rate of what's in that entourage effect? So I started having conversations with these scientists and doctors in the fields of cannabis, and I was just awestruck on how phenotypes play a bigger role on what the effect is, and THC is merely a piece of that, right? Which is important to know when you're talking about medical cannabis, right? Medical cannabis and hanging out with your buddies and smoking some dank shit is very different. If I'm paying, let's say, whatever I'm paying for an ounce as a medical patient, but I'm doing that every month because that's my dosage rate, right? Or versus, I'm only paying, whatever I'm paying for every few months because I generally don't smoke that much. That's usually what a non-medical patient goes through. The effects stem from what I learned was the overall exposure to the cannabis. So you have to kind of hit a breaking point. If you only smoke like once a month, you're always going to get super high. Like it's just going to smack you different. It's going to hit very hard. Like the sativas are going to hit you right here in the middle of your forehead. You get that euphoric feeling. You're just happy and laughing. And then the other one, the heavy indicas, you're just going to be couch locked, wanting some munchable foods and watching a movie, just laughing. Well, what I learned was after about a month, your body starts to break down cannabis differently, and you don't get that loopiness, that aloofness, or goofy ass, just high. You just feel the medical benefits of cannabis. And so I had a lot of conversations with, discussing things like absorptions and absorption rates, breakdown of cannabis in the body, the endocannabinoid system. There we go. Got it finally. and how the body is affected by this. So to have the conversation at length with you about not only marketplace, but, being that older head in the environment of today's, youth, I should say, what's cool and what's not. I always find it interesting because you never predict the marketplace, right? If we could, I think we would all be billionaires by now. But
For sure.
when you're looking at strain development and you're looking at marketplace, and then you have to outweigh the risks, benefits, right? Man, that's got to be very difficult for a person like yourself, being the chief revenue officer. I would be like, well, shit, if we heavily invest in something that I would want, I would feel like an asshole turning around and be like, hey, it ain't moving. Like that's a risky side of business. So to focus it more on that aspect of the cannabis industry, what is it that you're seeing as far as investment and the overall prolonged vision of the cannabis industry right now? Is it changing so rapidly with policies and reform? And like you brought up, the black market's influence. I shouldn't call it black market, but the underside, the street side of the street pharmaceutical side of it all.
Yeah.
Do you see that as something that is necessary for an entrepreneurial self like yourself, business like yourself, but also as somebody that has the years of experience where you're like, yeah, you gotta pivot, shake and move. But what values do you see moving forward in the industry at this point?
Yeah, it's a really good question, man. It's like everyone in the state of cannabis today, across the U.S., but primarily in California, it's about survival right now. To be honest with you, I think a lot of cannabis professionals have had to be really reactive to how things have played out, and that's been to the detriment of longer term strategy. And I think anyone in business needs to think long term, and that's frankly one of the more challenging things for me to have to navigate as I try to help lead this commercial strategy is de-risking our go-to-market plan, diversifying it in a way that we're more nimble and flexible when things honestly go wrong, right? There's part of us, right, as a business at POSIBL that is looking at the longer term genetic strategy, right? So how do we start to work with real science, real genetics companies to kind of isolate specific parts of the plant and really start to breed and do some things really in a more scientific way. But that's something that's being invested in that's not going to pay dividends for a very long time, right? In the frank nature of what we're operating in now is that we're going through a pretty big extinction event right now. Year over year, we've seen, I haven't seen the numbers as of late, but last I checked, it was over 20 million square feet of licensed California canopy has basically gone extinct over the last year, right? And that's really a function of just how the business has been set up. There's been an overinvestment, and frankly, the supply demand picture has not been calibrated. So for business professionals trying to lead a strategy, it's absolutely challenging. What always brings us together is the community and the love for the plant, right? And it's just a very, very challenging market to operate in. But I can tell you that, from my perspective, it's really just about growing as high a quality cannabis and medicine for the people that we can, presenting them with options, presenting them with brands that they can resonate with. And that's really the plan today and into the next 3 to 5 years. How we can expand on that is something that we're constantly looking at. But you have to be nimble. You have to, pay respect to the fact that this is still a very new industry, right? Like after alcohol prohibition, it wasn't until like after 10 years where things actually started clicking, right? We're in year 5. Like this is still a fucked market, man. We're building this thing brick by brick. But one thing I do know about cannabis people and cannabis professionals is like, we know how to adapt, right? Like we know how to adapt. And that's really the thing that gets me out of bed is like, fuck, like we're problem solving just literally every day. And, there's times where you feel like you figure something out, and then obviously something happens, and then you got to figure it out again, and I think it's exhausting, to be honest with you, but it's something that I don't think any other industry is providing right now. I think people that are having a tough time are looking at themselves in the mirror and saying, what am I doing in this thing? But at the end of the day, like, we're the pioneers, we're building this thing. So, I didn't know if that answers your question, but
no, it does
I can tell
perfectly.
You that, yeah, it's just how do we stay nimble enough to navigate the realities of what we're dealing with today, while having the foresight and long-term vision for the future. It's a jigsaw puzzle, bro. It's a big one. So
no, I feel you on that. I mean, just as a patient, I could, sitting back and observing and having some of the conversations that I've had, with the likes of yourself, especially learning, of course, about not only, growing great weed is one thing. Getting great weed to people in local domain is another thing, but becoming a distributor and creating something where you have the ability to foresee the future. You're heavily, I'm not saying heavily invested, but you're heavily invested in the leadership role right now, where you're not necessarily seeing the other ships around you because of how fucking far out you are. I bring up the Navy type of shit because I was in the Navy, right? Well, you're so far ahead, like your streets ahead, right? And people don't know, and you guys probably don't even know like how far ahead you are, which is, excuse me, which is incredible. You don't know how far ahead you are because there's no feedback right away, right? There's a feedback loop that's necessary to know progress, right? And you get these markers as you're growing as a company, as a person, as a father, like we were discussing, as kids, they hit these benchmarks, they hit these things, and oh, I'm doing a good job, right? And it gets more and more difficult throughout life. And especially with entrepreneurship and just business in general, logistics is another, oh my God, thing. Like, how do you move weight, right? In California, how do you move money, right? That's a whole other conversation, right? The way that banking structure is set up, which I'd love to get into, but to focus it in on like what you were saying is just really cool to say, like, man, we're pivoting, we're analyzing and troubleshooting, and you guys are making those leaps and bounds for the industry that is for the future right now. And a lot of people may not see that. I see it. That's the reason why when Zoe's like, hey man, you want to interview this dude? I'm like, hell yeah, I want to interview this dude. You want to learn about POSIBL? Fuck yeah, I want to learn about POSIBL. Like, that's tight. Like, to learn that you're minimizing cost and you're maximizing efficiency with water and the way that you produce the plant, to me is remarkable, because you're given a shit sandwich and you guys are like, all right, what are we going to do with this? Not only with policy, but licensing, whether it's incorporated or unincorporated, politics, Jesus Christ, don't even get started. Manufacturing, licensing, distribution licensing, banking, trying to make sure everybody's fed, insurances, all of the things that nobody sees when they buy a bag of weed, right? I mean, that's what really goes into this conversation. Now, to bring up that, when you do produce, right, and you're facilitating the distribution aspects, how difficult is it to literally not just like, oh yeah, we, this person, that person, but how do you actually break it down and get the plant product to the consumer? Is that, fleets of trucks? Is it like, what does that picture look like?
Yeah. Well, at POSIBL, right, we have a distribution license. We have we obviously co-manufacture. We manufacture the products directly in-house, right? So we employ over 100 people in our processing department to get the weed in the bag, to get the weed in the pre-rolls, to get the weed in the jars. We get that tested. We get that quote unquote retail ready. And then we have a network of distributors that we work with, depending on the brand vehicle that we're kind of pushing that weed through. We work with, almost not all of them, but a large percentage of the big distributors in California. And they're the ones who have the license and the know-how, the trucks, the fleet, the human capital to get our product from our farm into the hands of our retailers. We work with different sales agencies, right, who are the ones who are kind of an outsourced service to help basically sell that product into the retailers. And then we act as an overlay to help, tell that story. So it's a really, I think robust web of really strong human capital and business capital that gets products, to the retailers. And I think, if you go into a dispensary and you buy a bag of weed, like, you don't have any idea what it takes to get that weed into the bag to the retailer and into your hands, right? It's literally the most complex supply chain in the entire world, like hands down. Maybe I can't speak to some other weird supply chains I don't know anything about, but like this one for sure, coming from alcohol, that one was antiquated and regulated and one of the hardest as well. And then you move into cannabis and it's insane. But yeah, man, it's a network of human and business capital that really, support each other. And I think that's really where, I think a lot of cannabis companies maybe, bit off more than they could chew, as they say, hey, I want to do everything. I want to grow, I want to co-pack, I want to distribute, I want to sell, I want to collect the cash, I want to be the retailer and all these things. And, you can't be good at all those things at once, right? So I think there was this huge push to be vertical in the beginning. And then you've seen a drop off in that, right? You've seen a fallout from that and basically saying, okay, well, let's just focus on what we do best and make sure that we're partnering with like-minded people with similar visions and similar values and just get this weed into the hands of the people. But I think that's been, again, like I tip my hat to the people in cannabis, like it's not all, gumdrops and fairy tales or whatever, but it's the power of partnerships that I think get the product to the place it needs to be.
Awesome. That is just awesome, because as a consumer, I can tell you straight up, as a consumer, being able to know that what I'm paying for is of quality, right? I think that's the hardest part to explain. Everybody loves their hamburger, but they don't want to know how the meat got there, right? And that's a quick analogy of everything that we're kind of talking about, of the research and development between genetics, the research and development in agriculture, the cultures and the people that it unites and unifies with this vision of development and entrepreneurial spirit. It's enriching because to hear the story of yourself, you go from what would be honest, a pinnacle, right? You're working with these large names on Wall Street, and you're developing this concept of identity and self and growth and, just development, acceptance and societal affirmation of how you make it, right? And to go from that to liquor and alcohol, and then to cannabis as a whole, and then to recently now with this, to me, which is revolutionary, right? The way the concepts of light deprivation and supplemental light, I think, have been there, but to hit 100% year round, I haven't heard of that. I haven't heard of, reducing water expenditure by 50%, or increasing potency levels, or increasing terpene levels, or being able to develop multiple strains out of one cultivation plant, so to speak, right? And that's remarkable. That speaks, I think, loud enough to what you guys are doing and have done possible. Is just you guys are making it possible, right, for the future to develop. Like, to play on words and be a little, a little smirky there. I'm like, yeah, like, honestly, you guys are creating something that's never been possible before, and to create a possible future, a future that is incorporating all the dynamics of not only cultivation and cultivars and the traditions of cultures, but hitting every nail on the head, where you're leveraging the experiences of not only the developers, the agricultural developers, the research and science that goes into, well, how much light? Like when you were talking about earlier about 20% less light, I'm like, does that mean global warming? Do we fix it? Like, I don't know. But all I'm saying is, like, when I was learning about lumens, and I was like, well, how many lumens does it take per square foot in order to develop, a gram of weed, or a dense flower, or, the terpene or trichome concentration? I tip my hat, because it's just so much goes into not only the plant development, and like you're saying, you get cuts and the phenotypes and, you know, the concentrations, the THC content, like all of that goes into this marketing scheme of what cannabis has become. Mm-hmm. Now, to move the conversation slightly forward, in the next, let's say, year or so, what does it look like for you and your involvement with POSIBL?
Yeah, for us, you know, it's continuing, you know, our expansion plan, you know, so we have about 100,000 square feet of mixed light canopy today. You know, our goal is to essentially more than double that, right? And the way we have to do that is we have to, you know, execute on our commercial strategy, which is to bring best in class brands to a certain level of revenue and profitability that allows us to unlock, you know, more capital to continue to grow our vision to be, you know, the farm of the future, right? So that's really where I am. And, you know, the beauty about a brand, right, is that it doesn't have to live in California. You know, there's a plan to extend and expand that brand IP into other licensed markets. So, you know, I made some mistakes in my alcohol days where I expanded into additional markets too quickly when I didn't have my backyard unlocked. So we're not quite ready to start, you know, expanding, you know, at a rapid pace. You've seen that more frequently, you know, today in cannabis. Like, I think people are kind of fleeing California, to be honest with you. Like, I'm over California, I'm going to go to Missouri, I'm going to go to Boston, I'm going to Chicago or wherever. For us, you know, it's really where our operational know-how is. So we have to do it right here. So we're, you know, perfecting that go-to-market plan. And then we're going to start to expand, you know, extend that brand IP to other states as we continue to scale. But I think, you know, going back to what led into that question, you know, you're speaking about cannabis, how I like to think about it, which is it's an inflection point, or it's an intersection point, right? It's a universal language, in my opinion, right? So like when you light a joint, like you can have a conversation with anybody, right? It's like music, in my opinion, right? So that's on the personal fulfillment side. But then as an intersection point for business, it's a beacon for innovation, right? It's a beacon for, you know, science. It's a beacon for you know, like efficiency of logistics. I mean, it's all these minds coming together and say, fuck, this is a new plant. This is a new commodity. How do we reinvent this thing, you know? And, you know, what we don't want to see is for people just to make the same mistakes that they did, you know, throughout the years of growing supply chains and businesses. It's like, this is our opportunity to innovate, right? And I think that's really been the challenge, is that capital's dried up, right? Like businesses are going under. It's really hard to innovate, but at the end of the day, like this is where innovation is born, right? It's like Procter and Gamble, I think all their brands were built out of a recession, right? It's when things were really shitty. So for me, like I see this next phase of cannabis is scary, but like kind of exciting. Like you're going to see people that rise from the ashes that really focus on how to be a sustainable business rather than a business that's just like searching for sales and revenue, right? So with this comes, I think, a lot of innovation, but you know, not without a bunch of black eyes as well, right? Like you're gonna get beat up along the way. It's just how you figure it out. So yeah.
How you roll with the punches, right?
That's right.
Yeah. If we want to see POSIBL develop at the rate you guys are going, and to get that maximized development going, that vision of the future, how would one support that? Would we just click POSIBL, share the social medias, consume the brands?
Got you.
Know?
I think for us, it's going into a dispensary and buying the weed that we grow. That to me is the easiest way to help us achieve our goals. You know, pick your favorite dispensary, find out if it carries our brands. Our 3 in-house brands today are HUMO, Paradiso, and Dovetail. Paradiso and Dovetail are 2 brands that we just welcomed into the POSIBL family. We're super excited about, and they're going to be, you know, kind of pitched alongside the bigger portfolio strategy. So I would say if you can go into a dispensary and find those 3 brands and help us and purchase us, that's going to help us, see our vision, because every bag of weed that someone buys, adds to the probability of us, selling all the weed that we grow and continuing on with our expansion plan. Right. And with that expansion plan, comes more science, comes more technology, more innovation. And it really starts with, you and me and others and friends of yours going and buying our weed.
Solid approach, man. I mean, honestly, I can support the shit out of that. I know HUMO, and between HUMO, Paradiso, and Dovetail, I think you can really knock it out of the park. I mean, just thinking about it, I'm like, God damn it, man. It's been a while since I bought a bag of weed. I need to get my ass up and go to the dispensary and check it out, look into that. Now, how would somebody find whether or not a locality does have your brands?
Yeah. It's always nice when actually people ask the dispensaries, hey, you guys carry that? Because that gets it in their brain. But we try to keep our website up to date as far as our stockist who carries the portfolio. Weed Maps is a really good. We're Weed Maps verified. So if you type in our brands on Weed Maps, that will usually give you a good indication of which dispensaries hold it. Follow us on social media. At Get HUMO is a good place to look for the HUMO brand. POSIBL Project is our Instagram handle, just for the farm kind of Instagram, so you can kind of keep up with us there. We try to update as far as like where our weed's landing. So I would say those are probably the three ways to keep tabs of how to find it. And yeah, we'll make sure to keep that nice and active for everyone to be able to kind of track and keep and go buy it. That's really the goal there. So
solid, man. Solid. All right, so to wrap it up, let's go ahead and get some shout outs. Do you have any shout outs or any advice to anybody that wants to get more into this type of environment?
Oh man, I want to shout out my team. It takes a village, right? Like there's no one person that drives any success in this industry. It's all about the team. So, my greenhouse team, my processing team, my sales team. I mean, really everyone that I work with is inspiring. So would give a shout out there. And then, for people that want to get in the industry, I always try to say like, which companies and which brands really inspire you, right? On a human level. And just find ways to meet someone within that organization, have conversations, take that person out to lunch or a joint or whatever, and just learn the business. And if you can learn the business and start to speak that language, there's going to be opportunities, right? We're still in an environment where this is hyper growth, right? Despite a bit of a retraction here in the last, year or so, that's going to be a market that is going to continue to have people to be employed. So it's just at what level can you get in and have those conversations. So, find me on LinkedIn. I'm very open to having conversations with folks that are interested in getting in the industry. I've been part of a mentorship group for a while. So for me, it's inspiring to be able to kind of help folks that maybe want to get in the industry that don't know where to start. So
that is awesome. And how would we reach your LinkedIn? How do we spell it? Max, M-A-X, Rudsten?
Rudsten, yeah. R-U-D, D as in David, S as in Stephen, T-E-N.
Awesome. So it's Mac. I did it again. I did the same thing.
It's an X.
Max.
It's a big old X.
Yeah, I know.
Max.
So Max Rudsten, folks. Sorry, I'm a bit special. My brain's got underdevelopmental. All of the problems, everybody. You just need to stop smoking weed. I'm like, no, man. This is head injuries. This is time over years of just constantly getting my melon rocked around on the planet. Solid stuff, Max. I really appreciate your time. I'm super motivated to keep in touch with you, not only as cannabis industry, but you seem to have that energy of really wanting the plant to have success in this new developing, like I want to say renaissance, because it is. We came from the dark ages and then blah, 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 history. Everybody knows that shit. But to know where cannabis was and has been and where it's going, I think it's in the right hands of the right people. And to speak aloud of not only the entrepreneurial spirit, but how to develop some cool, just really cool science. I get man, I get so excited about just cool science in general. Like, what do you mean? Like, we reduce 50% water? Well, we can hit up Max on LinkedIn, and we can hit up POSIBL and all their social medias and get HUMO, right? We can learn about how this bridge was created and that we get a walk on and get some amazing fucking weed, right? At the same time. All right, Max. Well, we got to wrap it up there. And I again, I'm just so appreciative of your time.
Thanks, Joey. This is really fun, man. You seem to have a really cool perspective, given kind of where you come from, and yeah, keep spreading the gospel, man. It's super important. So thank you for your time as well.
Internet. Yeah, hello. Alltså sen idag hörs när man får på när ni ska göra så ska jag finna mig kapseln och det är inte så att ni ska snälla shit.
Well, I didn't need to sit.